If the most generally accepted definition of managing is the ability to get things done through and with others, then the most important skill of managing is the ability to delegate work to others. In fact, your success as a manager, as much as any other factor, will be determined by your ability and your willingness to delegate work to other people in such a way, in such a form, that they can get it done in a competent fashion. Your inability to delegate will condemn you as a manager to a life of underachievement and under-success and ineffectiveness. Now, the wonderful thing about delegation is that delegation is a skill. It's like typing with a typewriter, like riding a bicycle, that you can learn to be an excellent delegator, and that is the purpose of this mini-seminar. I'm going to give you 21 key ideas that you can use that are time-tested and proven over the years to enable you to become far more effective as a delegator. And if you just practice them over and over, over and over, repeat, 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 eventually it'll get to the point where people will refer to you as one of the more skilled delegators that they know. Delegation has a lot of benefits and advantages. First of all, delegation enables you to increase the quantity of your output from what you can do to what you can manage and control. Delegation enables you to increase the capability and the results of the people under you. It enables you to develop human potential. It enables you to concentrate more of your time doing the few things in your workplace that only you can do for your company. So delegation, the ability to delegate, the willingness to delegate is absolutely essential to your success in management. Let's go straight to the board. Let's talk about 21 key ideas that you can use to be a better delegator. Now, the first of these ideas is the acceptance that people are your most valuable resource. Number one, people are your most valuable resource. What does this mean? It means that they're far more valuable than computers or typewriters or office space or anything else, and that your primary job as a manager is to get the maximum return on investment on your people. You know that as much as 85% of the operating budget of any organization is invested in payroll. The question is, are you getting the maximum return out of those people? And delegation is one of the ways that you increase your return on investment. The average person works at 50 to 60% of capacity. That's all, 50 to 60% of capacity. That means that at least 50% of their capability is not being tapped in the average organization. What is an excellent organization? An excellent organization is where people are using more and more of their potential or their capacity to achieve the goals of the organization. The third is that your job is to grow people. As a manager, you are entrusted with the responsibility of taking care of people and growing them, because only people can be made to increase in value. A typewriter begins to depreciate and deteriorate. So does a desk, so does carpets. But people can actually grow in value depending upon how they are managed, how they are utilized by you, the manager. The fourth is that delegation is the method. It is how you develop people. It is the key developer of people is delegation. And how you delegate determines whether or not they grow and expand in their capabilities, or whether or not they contract, if you like, or retard in their capabilities. And delegation, finally, the most important of all, is delegation is how you fulfill your potential. And the wonderful thing is that your potential as a manager, as an executive, is probably unlimited, except by your ability to unleash the talents and abilities of others to delegate and supervise effectively. Because you really have two choices in the world of work. When something has been assigned to you and you are accountable to a higher authority, you have two choices: either do it yourself or get somebody else to do it. Your ability to get somebody else to do it more than anything else is going to determine your career track, your rate of promotion, your pay, your status, your position, your prestige, and your success in management. Okay, point number two, let's look at what we call myths that block delegation. There are myths that block effective delegation. These are, if you like, mental blocks in the minds of the individual manager. Some of these are conscious, you're aware of them. Some of them are unconscious. But wherever you see a poor delegator, in most cases you see a person who has one of these myths working. Number one myth, top of the list, is that there's not enough time. Sometimes people are so busy so swamped they say, I don't have enough time to sit down and explain the job to someone else. I've just got to get on with it. Or they delegate the job to someone else, but they don't have enough time to walk them through it. They say, do this, get this done by such and such a time, and they consider that to be delegation. In reality, that's not delegation. That's, as we'll talk about later, is abdication. So remember, there's always enough time. There's an old saying that says there's never enough time to do it right, but there's always enough time to do it over. In poorly managed organizations or work units, there's always seems to be enough time to do it over and correct the mistakes and the misunderstandings that have occurred. So eliminate that myth. Remember that taking the time to delegate well is the most effective investment of your time that you can engage in. Number two is we often have a tendency to think that the staff person is not competent enough. Very often managers underestimate the ability of their people. And the only way that you can test how capable people are is give them more to do than they've done before and allow them the latitude to make mistakes and to learn from it. People will surprise you. Amazingly enough, your staff probably have competences that you have never tapped. And if you learn to tap those competences, not only will they get more fulfillment, but you'll get a lot more done, which will help your career. There's another myth, is that if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself. You heard that? You can't entrust an important job to someone else. This is another myth that holds you back in management, which condemns you to continually operating rather than managing. The biggest reason for failure in the executive suite in management is the inability to move from doing the job to managing the job. The natural tendency is to fall back into your comfort zone and start doing it rather than delegating it and parceling it out. So be very, very alert to that. Your job is to manage, not to operate. The next myth is that people will think you are not on top of your job if you've got somebody else doing it. Very often, executives or managers are very greedy. They want people to think that I'm doing the job, I'm on top of it, I know what's going on all the time. Today, you can never know what's going on all the time, but you can always have access to the people who do know. And finally, the final myth is that because you're good at it, you should do it. And the rule with regard to this is fairly simple, is that whatever you have mastered, whatever you have gotten to the point where it is simple and straightforward and you can do it easily, delegate it and get on to something else. You should not be working on tasks that you've already routinized just because you're good at it. Again, a natural tendency is to fall into the habit of doing the jobs that we enjoy, is taking them all ourselves and doing them all the time rather than delegating them so we can get on to tasks that require greater complexity and greater involvement. That brings us to number three. What is the starting point of delegation? The starting point of delegation, like the starting point in all successful management, is think. T-H-I-N-K. Think about what you're doing. Most of the problems in management come from action without thinking. As a matter of fact, almost all failure, all mistakes comes from action without thinking. So how do you think? Well, one of the things that you have to do is you have to think through the job. Think through the job clearly. What is the job? What has to be done exactly? And think it through with clarity. There's an old saying that a stitch in time saves 9. The time that you spend sitting down, itemizing the work, and thinking through what has to be done and when it has to be done and to what quality and so on is the starting point of effective delegation. Often people delegate first or hand out tasks first and then think through the job afterwards. The second question is approach. How are you approaching it? When I go into a company as a management consultant, I find that the most important contribution that I can make is to help people ask the right questions, to help them engage in a questioning process so they think through and challenge their most cherished assumptions. Think through where they're going, where they're starting from, where they want to end up. How are they doing it now? Could there be a better way? To be your own management consultant, you have to do the same thing. How are we approaching this task? A good point which comes to mind continually is, should it be being done inside in the first place? Maybe it would be cheaper as a starting point to think about having it done by someone else and having someone else in the office simply coordinate it, being outsourced, as they say. Okay, number C is make a list of everything that has to be done. In a large task, you make a list. And this is the starting point of delegation. What are all the different tasks that have to be done to create a job? Again, every minute spent in planning saves 10 to 12 minutes in execution. The biggest single payoff you will ever have as a manager is to plan, and all planning begins with a pad of paper, a pen, and making lists and thinking through what has to be done and how it's going to be done. All right, number 4 with regard to delegation is what we call the factory model. And this is a mental tool that you can use to be more effective in your delegating efforts. And the factory model is this. It simply says that in every factory there are inputs. And the inputs in your factory may be time, resources, people, office, rent, equipment, money, and so on. And then inside the factory you have what are called activities. And if you can just imagine a factory with people working and machines going and conveyor belts and packaging and so on and so forth, so you have activities going on in the factory, and then you have outputs. And these outputs are what you might call results. Now, when you think of your unit, your department, your company, your area of responsibility, what you have to think of is the whole thing in terms of a factory, and ask yourself, what results are we supposed to produce? Why do we exist? What are the results that we have been hired to accomplish? And then when you look at each person within your organization, you ask and look at them also as a factory. Each person is a factory. They have resources available to them. They have activities that they do. They have outputs that they accomplish, but they're on the payroll to get results. Again, and a critical part of delegation is to think through the results that you're trying to accomplish and keep people's attention focused on results. So that's number 1. A is focus on results. This is one of the hallmarks of all successful managers and all effective people, is they have an intense result orientation. One of the hallmarks of ineffective people is that they focus on activities rather than on accomplishments. B is managerial leverage. Managerial leverage is a very important concept which comes from Andrew Grove. And it says that there are certain things that you can do that can multiply your output or the output of your area of responsibility. And that the manager's job is to do the things that give him or her the maximum leverage. For instance, buying a typewriter gives you leverage in that you can type faster. Buying a photocopier rather than sending the copies out. Buying a computer. These are all things, these are decisions that can give tremendous leverage, and delegation is the way that you get leverage too. Delegation enables you to multiply your outputs. It gives you tremendous leverage because simply by instructing a person, teaching a person, showing a person, and explaining a person what to do, they can do the job which can double your total output. However, managerial leverage works in reverse too. It's simply this. Imagine that an average employee working in an average speed can produce 10 units of work per day, whatever that is. Now, as a manager, you can either multiply or divide that amount. If you use effective delegation, and this person is working, say, at half speed, with effective delegation, you can multiply that 10 by maybe a factor of 1.5. You may get those 10 units up to 15 units of work per day. However, with ineffective delegation, fuzzy delegation, vague delegation, you may divide. The person who's supposed to produce 10, because of confusion, will end up only producing 8. They will waste time, they will spin their wheels, they will not be effective. That's a key question you have to ask yourself. Are you a multiplication sign in your work environment, or are you a division sign? Do people produce more as a result of working with you and with others around you, or do they produce less as a result of the ineffectiveness of delegation? When I was a young man in sales, I learned a beautiful line, and it said this. It said that the number one reason why sales do not close is because of fuzzy understanding. The number one reason why people do not function effectively in the world of work with regard to delegation is because they have fuzzy or vague understanding with regard to what it is they're supposed to be doing. And we're going to talk about that now. The next thing we're going to talk about, which is so important, is key result areas. Key result areas is where we start to develop real clarity with regard to why you, why the organization, why the individual is on the payroll. Your key result areas begin by you asking yourself this question: what have I been hired to accomplish? Why is my unit on the payroll? What results are we expected to accomplish as a result of, or as a way to justify our existence as a part of this company? So this is number 5. It's key result areas. Why are you on the payroll? If you are in charge of a department, why is that department on the payroll? Do you know for sure? Are you exactly accurate? Do you know why the company formed that department? Why don't you take and write a list of what you think your key result areas are and take it to your boss? And you will be surprised if you take it to your boss and ask your boss to set priorities on that list and tell you which he thinks to be the most important result you're supposed to get, second most important. When your boss starts to prioritize the list, you may find it's very different from your list. If it's different from your list and you don't correct it, you're in trouble. Key result areas are the critical determinant of managerial effectiveness, because we know that 80% of the value of what you do is contained in 20% of what you do. In some positions, it's 90-10. 90% of the value of what you do is contained in 10% of your activities. If you don't know what those 20% are or those 10% are, there is no way you can perform to distinction. There is no way that you can do superior work, which means there's no way that you can be promoted. Now, that having been said, the second question is, what can you and only you do? What can you and only you do that, if done well, will make a real difference? In other words, what is the unique contribution that you can make to your organization that will really pay off if you do it well? Because in every job, every position, there is one or two things, there are two things that you can do that can really make a difference. And focusing on those areas is where you can move ahead rapidly in your career. And then the next question with regard to key result areas is, why is your staff on the payroll? Or why are they on the payroll? What have they been hired to do? What is their primary function? What are their key result areas? And each member of your staff has to know what their key result areas are. Each person on your staff has to be crystal clear and know that this is what I have been hired to accomplish. That if I write an order of priorities, I will know that this is the number one thing that I'm supposed to do on a day-to-day basis. If they don't do that, they cannot perform to distinction, which means that your department cannot perform to distinction. What is the number one source for aggravation in the workplace today? Number one, top of the list, according to all the employee surveys, is not knowing what's expected. Not knowing what's expected is the major reason why people perform poorly, why people are demotivated, why people fight, why people are unhappy or sick. Not knowing what's expected causes people to spin their wheels, to go around in circles, to become cross and irritable, because you don't get any self-esteem or reinforcement if you're doing something when you don't know what's expected. And the responsibility of the manager is to make crystal clear to everybody what is expected of them in their position and in order of what order of priority. This brings us to number 6, which is standards of excellent performance. And this is an important distinction. As opposed to standards of performance, an organization that is really effective and an executive that's really effective sets standards of excellent performance. They sit down again and think through and say, what does excellent performance look like? And then that is the standard that they set for their area of responsibility, the unit or the company, and that's the standard they set for every job that they delegate and supervise. Okay, remember this, that in order for you to have standards of excellent performance, you have to be able to measure. You have to find some way of measuring in terms of time, duration, money, and so on, because what gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets done. Most important of all rules of managerial effectiveness, what gets measured gets done. Business is quantitative. If it's not getting measured, then there's no way that people can tell whether or not they're doing a good job. So find some way to measure it. Another thing that you must ask is to remember that only excellent performance motivates. If you want to motivate and bring the very best out of your staff, the key to it is to set standards of excellent performance. Because if people do an average job, they don't get anything out of it. If they do a poor job, their self-esteem goes down. But if they do an excellent job and get recognized for an excellent job, their self-esteem goes up and they are motivated to do it again and again and again. And if we look at the excellent companies in America, we find that the excellent companies all set standards of excellent performance, which are the motivating factors. Remember that agreement on key result areas and standards of performance are essential to effective delegation and effective supervision. By the way, what do you think the number two reason, or the number two reason why people are unhappy in the world of work? It's lack of recognition. Why did they get lack of recognition? It's lack of recognition for doing a good job. How can they tell if they've done a good job? Only if you set standards of excellent performance that tell them and make the measurement objective. You see, if you don't have objective standards, if you don't have quantifiable or measurable standards, then excellent performance is always just the opinion of the boss. And whenever measurements are subjective, you have nothing but personality problems, morale problems, political problems within the organization. So make your measurements objective. Show people that this is the standard. If we do it this way, if we quantify it and measure it and do it this way, this constitutes excellent performance. This is the key to everybody getting ahead in the organization. That brings us to number 7. Number 7, key for delegation and supervision is management by objectives. Now let me just take you and walk you right through the steps on management by objectives. These are the key steps starting from the top. First of all, management by objectives is a method that is used with competent staff, people who have experience in the field. The boss and the employee sit down and they plan what is going to be done in a planning period. A 1-week period, a 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. But they plan a planning period and they agree on goals for the planning period. They agree upon measurable, specific, time-bounded goals for the planning period. That's the starting point. The second point is that they agree on plans. How is it going to be accomplished? And they work out plans. And by the way, management by objectives is not something you do in 5 minutes. It's something you go back and forth on over an extended period of time until you work out a very clear set of goals and objectives, clearly measured with regards to time and quantity, and then you work out plans and strategies to accomplish the goal. This is a very active process between the manager and the managed. The third thing is then you assign the task and you delegate the task and then you compare results on a regular basis. For instance, you would compare, if you set an objective of a certain level of sales for 1 year, then you would compare the results on a 1-month basis. So every month you would check and see how you were doing against the standards. And D is that you revise and adjust the plans as you get information, as information comes back. Now the important part of this is the ability to delegate the whole entire task, to turn it over to the person completely and say, all right, now that we've agreed clearly on what's to be accomplished, when it is to be accomplished, how it's to be accomplished, when we're going to look at results, and when we're going to revise and adjust, then you turn it over completely to the other person and let them run with it. This works extremely well, as I say, with competent, experienced employees, and it requires also that you delegate the authority commensurate with the responsibility. That means the authority to spend, the authority to make decisions, the authority to utilize resources, the authority to command the services of other people in the organization. And give the staff member considerable freedom. Management by objectives is aimed at giving freedom because freedom is a key motivator. The more you can structure the work environment so that people are free to work toward predetermined objectives, the more excited, the more positive you're going to be. And this brings us to number 8. And 8 is what we call the best boss description. And it's important to think about this because we'll come back to this in this model a little bit later. The best bosses, according to the surveys that have been done, have 3 qualities or characteristics. And the best way to describe it is by taking a graph like this. And this graph, starting from 0 here, has 2 dimensions. This dimension is the graph or the dimension of consideration. This is how friendly the boss is to the staff. This graph is the graph of task. This is how task-oriented and structure-oriented the boss is. And if you divide this into 4, you'll find that there are bosses that are very low in consideration and low on task. You'll find there are bosses that are very, very friendly, but very vague with regard to what is to be done. You'll find that there are bosses in this quadrant who are very focused on the task, but they don't really care about the people. And you'll find that there are bosses who are very high on task and very high on consideration, what we call a 10-10 boss. Now, the most successful and most effective bosses by survey have 3 qualities. A is they're high on consideration. They really care about their people and their people feel that. B is that they are very clear on structure. They make it clear what is to be done, how it's to be done. They set standards of excellent performance. They describe the job clearly. And number C is they give considerable freedom. As a matter of fact, once they've assigned the job and delegated the job completely, they get right out of the way of their staff. Over and over again it has been said, and you can look into your own experience, your own work as an employee, is the time when people are the happiest is when they are doing work autonomously and their boss leaves them completely alone to perform. Now, this doesn't mean that people should have work thrown at them that's over their head, but it means that the best situations in our working life is when we felt that we were pretty much free to do our job the way we wanted to do it. We didn't have anybody looking over our shoulder. We didn't have anybody harassing us. We just did it the very best we could and took the results in. So that's the starting point, is to determine that you're going to be very high on consideration, very high on structure, and then give people lots of freedom. As a matter of fact, you can tell how good a boss you are by asking yourself, how much freedom can you give your people? How much latitude can you give them? How often do they have to come back to you for decisions? Because the very best bosses are able to give their people days, even weeks of freedom on certain projects without reviewing them, without worrying about them, without going back to them. All right, this brings us to number 9. These are keys to effective delegation. Keys to effective delegation. And again, this is the guts. Oops, it's number 9. This is really the guts of this program, and so I'll take a little bit of extra time on it. The keys to effective delegation, there's 7. Number 1 is match. This is the key word. Match the job to the skills of the person. Make sure that the job that you want the person to do and the skills and competence and motivation of the person match up pretty much 1-to-1. It doesn't mean that you can't give people jobs that are more challenging, but it's very important that you don't give people jobs that are so difficult for them that they haven't a chance to do it, or so easy for them that there is no motivational power inherent in them. The second is delegate gradually to build up competence. We talk in other places of throwing people in, starting them off strong, and so on, but that doesn't mean that you delegate the entire task. It just means that if you're going to delegate responsibility, where you give them the job and leave them alone, do it gradually. Have them demonstrate to you and prove over a period of time that they have the capability to do it. Other than that, a person can create far more problems than they cure. Delegate the whole task. This is important. Again, we have found that a key motivator in the world of work is to have a total task that a person is responsible for from beginning to end. In fact, in every single job, every single person should have at least one job that is totally their own. It's a key factor in building loyalty, commitment, dedication, and involvement with the organization, is to know that one part of the task is totally belongs to a single person. Also, delegate for specific results. Keep the employee's eye on the ball. Keep him fixed on results. Keep them thinking of the results that they've been hired to accomplish. Number 5, very important, delegate with participation and discussion. We find that there's a direct relationship between the amount of time that a person spends discussing and internalizing the job with the boss and their commitment to doing it right. If you just tell a person to do something, they have a limited amount of commitment, but if you discuss it with them and they participate and you develop the scenario and you tell them why the job is being done and the standards, and they understand clearly, then they internalize the job. They develop what is called ownership. They own the job and they become committed internally to doing it well. Delegate authority. Delegate authority commensurate with the job. Tell the person exactly what resources will be available to them to do the job so there's no confusion later. And number 7 is leave the person alone afterwards. Leave the subordinate, I'll just write the sub, alone afterwards. Once you've delegated the job, delegate it all, 100%, give it to the subordinate, and then don't take it back. There's an old saying that tradition is we give the job and then we take it back. How do we take it back? We take it back by continually checking on the person. We continue to take it back by continually asking for feedback and then giving comments and recommending changes in processes and procedures. So leave the subordinate alone. Don't take the job back, even if the subordinate makes mistakes, even if you have to bite your lip. The key to effective delegation is not only to get the job done, but to grow the subordinate. And this brings us to number 10. Number 10 is management by exception. Management by exception is a tool, and it simply says this, is once you have clearly determined the job, what is to be done, when it is to be done, how it is to be measured, and so on, then you have the person report variances only. For instance, if the job is to sell $1,200,000 worth of product over 12 months, that's $100,000 worth of product per month. If the sales are at $100,000 a month, then there is no need to report back. However, if the sales drop to 80 or 50 or 70 or 90, then they report by exception. By the way, this is a tremendous time-saving tool for a manager. If you can tell people, look, you don't have to come back to me unless something goes wrong. I made an appointment yesterday, a long-distance appointment in another city. And we were talking about, well, I'll get back to him, he'll get back to me, and so on. I say, look, let's agree on this time, this place, this date, and if there is any variation or change from that, then call me back. Other than that, I'll see you at that time and place. And you know what happens then? Is that 90% of the time, there's never any kind of a callback, and there's no need to confirm or repeat or anything else. So management by exception is an important tool, especially if you tell the individual that you're delegating it to that now that you've got this job, it's yours, it's your ball, you run with it, and only come back to me if you have any problems. All right, number 11, manager as teacher. One of the key responsibilities of the manager is to teach. And delegation is a way of teaching. It's a part of teaching. So here are the keys. Remember, teach employees how to do the job. Most people who come in, especially junior employees, especially people that you're bringing up, they have to know how to do the job. And in order to delegate effectively, sometimes you have to teach them how the job is to be done, what the process and procedure is. This is part of your job in developing people, growing people in the organization. Take the time to explain. Take the time to explain your preferred method. For instance, if you're going to ask somebody to do a job, say that this is the way that I think you should do it based on my experience. Start using this process. You start here, you work here, you check on this and be alert to this. Tell the person what you want them to do and tell them why. Now this is important for the simple reason that if a person knows why and knows why you prefer a particular methodology and understands your experience with this methodology and the strengths and weaknesses of it, not only are they more likely to get the job done faster, but they're also capable of seeing deviations and coming up with improvements that you may not have thought of since the last time you did that job. Be patient and supportive. Remember, it takes time for people to learn and internalize. Mostly, people learn by dialoguing or discussing. So if a person asks you a lot of questions and comes back to you several times, don't become impatient because it'll just discourage them from asking you questions. If you discourage them from asking you questions, then they'll go out and they'll try to do the job themselves. They'll try to please you, and very often they'll make big mistakes that'll cost you a lot more time and a lot more money than if you took the time to explain it thoroughly in advance. And finally, invite feedback. If you have any questions, come and see me. If you have any problems, I'm at your service. Invite feedback. Encourage the person to come back to you on a regular basis. And if you have any doubt about their ability, work out and arrange what you might call a schedule of monitoring so that every week you sit down and review progress, or even every day if it's that important. All right, number 12, very important part of this, is positive expectations. We know that the expectations that you have of your staff, just like the expectations that your boss has of you, the expectations you have of your staff have a powerful impact on how well they perform. So always express confidence in your people. Express confidence. Say, I know you can do a good job at this. I have complete faith in you. I believe in you. But these simple words, I have complete faith in you. I have complete faith. Even if you doubt it, say it anyway, and you will find that your staff member will do everything possible to prove that you are right. Express confident expectations. Say, I believe in you. I know you can do it. I know that you'll measure up to it. And if you have any difficulties at all, just come back to me and I'll give you all the help that you need. But always at the end of assigning a task, express confident expectations. Number 13 is delegate decision-making and problem-solving. Delegate decision-making and problem-solving. One of the hardest things to do, but one of the things that is absolutely essential if you want to develop wisdom, judgment, foresight, and intelligence in your staff. The only way that you can do it is by giving them the opportunity to solve problems and make decisions even though they may make a mistake. Delegating decision-making is a powerful motivator. It's also a powerful people builder. So when people come to you with decisions, every time possible, refer the decisions back to them. Say, what do you think we should do? How do you think we should handle it? Or even better yet, you take care of it. It's your responsibility. Have them and here's a 4-step method, by the way, which many executives have used to dramatically diminish the number of problems that come to their door. First step is instead of them bringing you a problem, you say, I want you to do these 4 things before you come to me. First of all, define the problem clearly. Define the problem or the decision that has to be made clearly before you bring it to me. B is define the alternatives. Define alternative solutions. And do this on paper. Don't have them come in and say, what should we do about this? You say, you define the problem clearly, define the alternatives. C, pick one with reasons. And determine which one of these solutions you would implement. And D is come to you only if necessary. Come to you only if necessary. I learned this from an executive who found that he was spending 80% of his time was spent in conversations with his staff, talking around and about problems that they were working on, and he finally realized that in most cases, neither of them were really sure about what the problem was. So he initiated this system, and he even typed up a form that the person had to fill out, and he said, before anybody brings me a problem from now on, I want them first of all to define it clearly so that we both know exactly what we're talking about. Second of all, I want you to investigate the solutions to the problem and look at the pros and cons of each solution. Number 3 is I want you to recommend a solution. Pick one that you feel is the best. And number 4, only come to me if you still have some doubt or some uncertainty. And you know what happened? Is that people stopped bothering him. Is that people just stopped coming to his door, and his staff grew in their capacity to solve problems and to come up with creative ideas. And the more they grew, of course, the more capable he was of doing his own work and getting more done. This brings us to number 14. And 14 is an important one. 14 is simply this. It is inspect what you expect. Inspect what you expect. Inspect what you expect. If it's important enough to delegate, then it's important enough to expect. Now, this doesn't mean that you look over the person's shoulder on a regular basis, but what it does mean is that you set up regular monitoring times where you and the person will meet on a regular basis to discuss progress. But if it's important enough, inspect it. The reasons for these, number A is control, is when you inspect a job that you have assigned, you convey to the staff member in no uncertain terms that this is important. And when a person knows that it's important, not only do they feel better about working on a task that you care about, but they will strive to do the task better. Second is delegation is not abdication. As we said before, delegation is not abdication. If you do not inspect the job, what you're doing is you're just abdicating it. If you abdicate responsibility for a job, chances are mistakes will take place that will be very expensive in terms of time and money to correct. Use what is called management by wandering around, umboa. The reason why umboa, management by wandering around, is so effective is that it's the very best way for you to get timely feedback. Timely feedback means that you can see what's going on quickly. You get a very clear idea of what is going on. You don't have to wait a week or a month. You actually get a feel for it. So walk around, talk to people, see how they're doing. And then finally, modify the task if necessary. Modify task if necessary. If you've assigned a job and the job is too big or too difficult, management by wandering around, inspecting, controlling, and so on will tell you very quickly that you've put the person over their head, or they need to be doing more, or they need to be doing less, or in some cases they need to be doing it differently. Remember, in a dynamic economy, in a rapidly changing situation, things are happening so rapidly that what seemed like an absolutely perfect delegation on one day may need complete revision the day after because of new information. All right, number 15 is regular feedback. Regular feedback is a key motivator in the world of work. As a matter of fact, if people are not getting regular feedback, they soon become demoralized. Regular feedback is a key form of communication between you and your staff. Just like you have communication between you and your spouse or your children, you have to communicate with your staff and tell them how they're doing. And the key to regular feedback is make it non-judgmental. Most people feel that when they are giving feedback, they're telling people how they're doing, how the job is going, what's happening, that they have to tell them that it's bad or good. In most cases, all you have to do is give neutral feedback, what we call being a timekeeper. Just be a timekeeper and go and tell them what the results are. Tell them what sales figures are. Tell them what productivity, inputs, outputs, and so on. Tell people how they're doing. If people are doing well, tell people how they're doing. People are fascinated by their jobs. People want to know if they're doing well. People want to know how well they're doing in comparison to others. As a matter of fact, there's something called social comparison theory that says that we only judge ourselves in comparison with other people who we feel are similar to us. And so if your people are, or your company is doing well as or better than other companies, tell people that, because it's a big motivator. And also catch them doing something right. When regular feedback, if you can find opportunities for praisings, catch them doing something right. When you find opportunities for praisings, Thomas J. Watson, the founder of IBM, was very famous for walking through plants, factories, and offices. He always carried a checkbook. And whenever he saw somebody doing something right, he just wrote out a check. And it may have been a $5 check or a $10 check or a $25 check, but the impact of that was tremendous. People, in most cases, never cashed the checks. They signed them, they framed them, they put them on their walls. But the idea of handing out checks, catching people doing something right, giving rewards and recognition immediately had a tremendous impact on motivation. Well, this brings us to positive self-esteem. Now, self-esteem is the key to peak performance in managing and delegation. And there's two keys to peak performance, two keys to raising self-esteem. The first is that self-esteem requires, in order, it requires goals, it requires standards, so a person knows how well they've achieved the goals. It requires success. It requires that people actually do achieve the goals and get the feeling of success. It requires positive expectations on the part of the staff or on the part of the manager. It also requires recognition, because there's no point in being a winner or achieving the goal unless it's recognized. And it also requires, as we said before, comparison. People like to know how they're doing in comparison with others. That's why races, whenever people run in races, they run faster and faster and faster. That's why in long races you have standards that are set up throughout the race. In a marathon, you have standards sometimes every quarter mile, so that people know exactly how well they're doing for the entire race. It keeps them running from marker to marker. And the second key to self-esteem comes from something that Mary Kay Ash has developed for her company, and she says she feels that everybody has a sign around their neck that says, "Make me feel important." Make me feel important. And she treats everybody that she meets as though they had this sign and they were wearing this sign right around their neck, and it hung right down here, and it says, "Make me feel important," or "Make me feel important." And she treats everybody as though that sign is there, and she does everything possible to make them feel important. Number 17 is what we call situational leadership, and I think I'll come over here for that. Situational leadership, a tremendous amount of work has been done on this, and what it simply says is that in different situations, different leadership styles are required. In situations of high stress, low stress, situations working with professionals or unskilled people, different types of leadership are required. You would not run a research laboratory the same way you would run a firefighting team. And there are three basic styles of leadership, and these have to do with what is called task-relevant maturity. Task-relevant maturity means how knowledgeable and skillful is the person at the job. Now, interestingly enough, this is exactly the opposite of what is called the sink-or-swim method. And basically, the philosophy or the psychology of task-relevant maturity says that when a person starts a new job, they have low task-relevant maturity, and they need a lot of hands-on training. So here are the three types of maturity. One is called low, and low task-relevant maturity is whenever a person starts a new job, even a very skilled, educated, experienced, older person starting a new job, at that new job has low task-relevant maturity. That is maturity relevant to the new task. And they require hands-on, if you like, care and training at the very beginning. And as we know, hands-on training at the beginning of any new job is one of the surest guarantors of peak performance in that job later on. The second is what is called medium task-relevant maturity. This is when a person has a better understanding of the job, and this requires, if you like, result-focused discussions. Feedback and discussions with the boss on results and methods to achieve the results. And then you have high task-relevant maturity. The person knows what results are expected, knows what standards and everything else, and here you just simply have easy feedback and relaxed discussion. In other words, the person is a pro, they know what their work is, they don't have to have the boss telling them what to do. Those are the three standards, and you have to look at the people working for you on a regular basis and say, where are they in this? Are they low, medium, or high in terms of the job? And when the job changes, a person who has a high task-relevant maturity in your company, if you give them a new assignment, they go back to low. And they found that with senior executives, wherever they had a senior executive who failed, but after being moved into a new position, almost invariably they were moved into that position with no help, no backup, no support, no training or anything else, and they started to flounder. Now, number 18 is what we call basic personality types. With your staff, it's important that you know that there are several, actually it breaks down into as many as 16 basic personality types, but we can limit it to 4. And these personality types amongst your staff require different treatment, different type of delegation, different type of supervision in order to be effective. Here are the 4. And again, we use the same scale that we used before, only this is the scale of relationships. People on this end of the scale are very high in relationships orientation, in their desire and need to get along with others. At this end, you have what you might call task orientation. People at this end of the scale are task orientation. People at this end of the scale are very, very strong on getting the job done, very results oriented. Well, if you divide it up into 4 quadrants, you have what we call the relator, you have the thinker or the analytical person, you have the driver or the autocrat, and up here you have the expressive or the socializer. Now, how do you deal with these different people? Well, a person who is very high in relationships but low in the others is a person that is usually slow to make up their mind. They need a lot of encouragement. They need a lot of warmth. They need a lot of support. They like to talk things through. They're more concerned about relationships, getting along with you and getting along with others than anything else. Down here you have the thinker. The thinker is very, very fastidious about detail. The thinker wants to know the task exactly. He wants to be told the process, the details, the procedure, if you like. In other words, how is the task to be done? What are the details? How is it to be measured? They're very, very specific and analytical in their approach. The expressive up here tends to be the person who is very extroverted, outgoing, warm, and so on. This person needs to have the big picture. Give them the big picture, give them the what, and the why, and give them, if you like, measures of accomplishment. They're impatient. They don't have a lot of time for detail. They can grasp the big picture quickly. They're pretty spontaneous. And down here, you have the result-oriented person. The result-oriented person is task-focused. They are impatient. They want the facts, and they want them now. They don't take a lot of time. They're usually quick thinkers. Sometimes they're type A's. They're drivers. Just give them the facts, give them the information that they need, and let them get on with the job. People are very job-focused. So when you look at the people who report to you, you know that you'll have to deal very differently with a relator than with a driver. With a driver, you'll have to get to the point right away. Tell them what you want. Tell them how you want it. Tell them when you want it. With a relator, you'll have to sit down. You'll have to take a little bit more time. You'll have to talk to them. You have to make sure that they feel good about themselves. And then you have the thinker. The thinker will be very, very precise in their questions. They'll want to know exactly how it's done. They don't want to make mistakes. The thinker is very, very concerned about accuracy, about correctness, about getting everything done right. This brings us to number 19, which is 3 different leadership styles. And again, this is worthwhile pointing out because there's been so many discussions over leadership styles. And there are 3 basic styles that have been tested over and over again. And they are, from the top, the autocratic style. And the autocratic style is the old style, the military style. Do it my way or hit the highway. Do this, don't do that. Stern disapproval, criticism, exact standards, looking over the shoulder, watching them all the time, demanding regular feedback, reports, processes, procedures, and so on. This type of leadership, called the autocratic style, tends to work in certain situations, but as soon as the leader leaves, everything stops getting done. People sort of drop down to the lowest common denominator of performance. The next style is what is called the democratic style. And if you say, we take the autocrat, this is number 19, we take the autocrat, we take the democrat, and we take what is called the laissez-faire. And the laissez-faire, the democrat is the person who uses participation, involvement, discussion, and interaction. The laissez-faire is the person who says, okay, here's the job, guys, go get it. Very relaxed, very laid back, not involved, lets people determine their own time, their own work hours, their own standards of performance. The interesting thing is that the autocrat, when the autocratic person leaves, paralysis sets in. The organization, nobody wants to make a decision, nobody wants to do anything, everybody just spins their wheels. In the laissez-faire organization, when the leader leaves, anarchy sets in. People argue, fight, nobody does anything, very little is accomplished. Whatever is accomplished is always done as a result of conflict. But the democratic environment, where people are encouraged to discuss and get involved and share ideas and look at where they're going, and they know the what and the why and the standards and so on and so forth, tends to be the high-performance environment. When the person is there and when the person is not. Major reason is in the democratic environment, a high level of responsibility is encouraged among everybody. So whether the leader is there or not, people continue to accept the responsibility. This brings us to number 20, avoid reverse delegation. This is very, very important. One of the bugaboos of management is that if you're not very careful, your staff will delegate the monkey back up to you, as William Onken said. So avoiding reverse delegation, there's 4 or 5 areas where people are very clever at reversing delegation. Number 1 is information. They come in and they say, I don't know how to do or where to find the information on this. Can you help me? What you do is you reverse it right back and you say, it's your job to find out that information. Here are some places for you to go, but it's up to you to do it. So avoid committing yourself to get information for people because it can be a major time waster. Number 2 is a need for a solution to a problem. Sometimes people will come to you for a problem and you say, can you take care of this for me? And you think, well, you're the boss, you know, you have the experience and the knowledge and so on. And they will leave you with the problem, and now the monkey is on your back. Again, reverse it right back and say, solving that problem is your solution. Go and develop and define the problem, develop the solutions, pick one, and come back to me in the latter stages of the decision making, not at the beginning. Number 3 is the need to handle difficult tasks. Sometimes people will come to you and say, well, this is too tough for me. I don't know how to do it. I've never done it before. And they will reverse delegate difficult tasks to you. You, as a competent manager, if you're not careful, your ego gets involved, and you say, well, okay, I'll take care of that. I understand it's important. It has to be done right. No, it's better that the person does it and learns how to do it than that you take it back. And D, the fourth, is the need to intervene in personal problems. Now sometimes, as a matter of fact, for the rest of your life as a manager, you're going to find that people don't get along. People squabble. People have problems in the office. If this is the case, there's often a tendency for somebody to come to you and say, so-and-so is doing this, so-and-so said that, I'm really cross about this, and so on. What you have to do is you have to say, then if you have this problem, you resolve it. One of the best strategies for that, by the way, is if two people are having a difficulty, call them both in and sit them down and say, we're going to resolve this problem right here and right now before anything else happens, and have it resolved right there in front of you. Instead of one person coming to you with one story, another person coming to you with another story, have them both come in, sit down, close the door, and get it resolved before they leave the office. And that brings us to number 21 with regard to delegation and supervision. Is important is to accept 100% responsibility for your work and for everything that happens to you. 100% responsibility, 100% accountability for the output of your department, for delegating the right tasks to the right people, for delegating effectively, for supervising, for getting the job done through others. And practice these three keys. The first one is view your staff as family members. View them as younger members of your family, almost like children, and realize that just like children, they need a lot of feedback, they need a lot of accurate direction, they need teaching, they need guidance, they need help, they need performance standards, they need to be taught. And look at them through the eyes of a parent who cares about their children. B is what we call the friendship factor. Effective delegation and effective management, again, comes back to the friendship factor over and over again, which means liking and trust are the basis of effective management. And the better you delegate, the better you build people, the more you grow them, the more they're going to like themselves, the more they're going to like you. The third point is the golden rule. Practice the golden rule in everything that you do. Treat your staff the way you'd like to be treated by a boss. Delegate the way you'd like to be delegated to. Give feedback the way you'd like to be given feedback to. Remember how frustrated you have felt in positions where you didn't know what was expected or you didn't get fair recognition. Make sure that you don't put your staff in that position. And remember, finally, that human resources are the most valuable asset that the company has. Human resources are central to the company. You have been entrusted with the most precious and the most valuable asset that your organization has. And your ability to get results through others, your ability to delegate, your ability to supervise, as much as anything else, will determine your career track as a manager. Handle your people with care, handle them with patience, handle them with gentleness, give clear instructions, clear standards, clear delegation, clear inspection, clear supervision, and commit yourself to building the winners of the future. And if you do that, they will make you a winner too.